Hello friends, let us now learn some important points about the bronchogenic cyst. So, bronchogenic cyst it originates as sequestration from the ventral foregut. It originates from ventral foregut, which will give rise to tracheobronchial tree later. This bronchogenic cyst, it is lined by inner layer of ciliated columnar epithelium. So it is lined by a layer of ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay. Then the bronchogenic cyst is most commonly located in the middle mediastinum, and we have two types of bronchial cyst. One, we have the mediastinal type of bronchial cyst. Second, we have the parenchymal type of bronchial cyst. First, in the mediastinal type of bronchial cyst, here this mediastinal type of bronchial cyst is present in subcarinal location or right paratracheal location, or it is present in hilar location. And this mediastinal bronchial cyst does not communicate with tracheobronchial tree. That is one important thing. It does not communicate with tracheobronchial tree. Then we have the parenchymal type of bronchial cyst. These parenchymal type of bronchial cyst are mainly perihilar type, and these will communicate with tracheobronchial tree. And if you do a chest x-ray, you will see presence of dense mass is seen on chest x-ray. On CT or MRI, you can clearly find the anatomical location or delineation of this mass. And treatment is, you can do surgical excision. This surgical excision is done in all the patients, and this once you do surgical excision is mainly done to prevent complications and for symptomatic relief. And you will also do it for histological confirmation. Then this is about the bronchogenic cyst. Then the next important disease in pediatric pulmonology is, we have pulmonary sequestration. Pulmonary sequestration is malformation of the lung. Here there is malformation of the lung. So this malformation of the lung can be present. It can be present without bronchial communication, or it can have an aberrant systemic blood supply may be there. So, if I tell you the examples, then you will understand this pulmonary sequestration. The most common site of pulmonary sequestration is posterior-basal segment of the left lower lung. Then the main clinical features of pulmonary sequestration include, here the patient suffers from recurrent chest infections are seen in these patients. Then if you see the investigation of choice, we have to do CECT for finding out this disease. Okay. Next we have two types of sequestration are present. One, we have, so these pulmonary sequestrations are divided into two types. One, we have intralobar sequestrations, and second, we have extralobar sequestrations. First, we will see some important points about intralobar sequestration. Intralobar sequestration, here the abnormal pulmonary malformation will reside in the lung parenchyma. So that means if this is the lung, and inside the lung itself you will see this abnormal growth, abnormal malformation, and this the 85% of its arterial supply is derived from aberrant artery arising from the aorta directly. Then if you see, the venous drainage is through the inferior pulmonary vein, And here the main treatment of this intralobar pulmonary sequestration is you will have to do either lobectomy or you will have to do either segmentectomy. This is mainly done because this can increase the because whenever there is increased risk of infections and increased risk of bleeding, in order to prevent that, we do this lobectomy or segmentectomy. Then we have one more disorder which is called as extralobar sequestration. In extralobar sequestration, okay, in this here this um, this this malformation is present outside the lung tissue. Okay, it even has a separate pleural covering. Not only it is outside the lung tissue, and it is bound by a separate pleural covering. In this extralobar manifestation, I mean sequestration, it is associated with multiple anomalies. Then this is extralobar sequestration is asymptomatic, and the treatment here is by observation. We will have to observe for treatment. Observation is the treatment of choice. Then the next important thing in the lungs is eventuration of diaphragm. In eventuration of diaphragm, this is characterized by abnormal elevation of diaphragm. That means the diaphragm will be, this is, so I will draw in next page. Okay, this is one lung, this is other lung. Now the diaphragm here is, it should be like this, and it is abnormally elevated on one side like this. So this is called as eventuration of diaphragm. This abnormal elevation can be due to paralysis or it can be due to atrophy of muscle fibers. So there are two types of this eventuration. One, it can be due to congenital or it can be due to acquired. In congenital, it occurs due to the failure of muscleization. There the muscles may not be formed congenitally itself in the dome of diaphragm. That will result in congenital eventuration of diaphragm. Or in acquired, there is dysfunction in the phrenic nerve, and this can be due to neuromuscular junction disorders or it can be due to trauma. So these are the two important causes of eventuration of diaphragm. Then if you see then in the acquired cause, the most common cause of acquired eventuration is mainly the birth trauma. And in the birth trauma also, if you were asked what is the most common cause of acquired eventuation, that is breech presentation, and this is most commonly seen on the left side, most commonly in the male patients. Then if you see the treatment of choice, we will have to do application should be done, followed by resection should be done. First we should do application. If it is not possible, then we have to resect the diaphragm. During surgery, diaphragm should be kept in a fixed in inspiration. Always we should fix the diaphragm in inspiration. This is because when you put the diaphragm in inspiration, this will minimize the paradoxical movement and it will also decrease the mediastinal shift. So this is about the eventuation of diaphragm. Then after eventuation of diaphragm, the next important thing is about tracheoesophageal fistula. Tracheoesophageal fistula. Here there is abnormal connection between the esophagus and the trachea. Okay, so this abnormal connection which you see between esophagus and the trachea is called as tracheoesophageal fistula. This tracheoesophageal fistula is sometimes associated with esophageal atresia also, and this tracheoesophageal fistula is most commonly seen in males. So first type, we have five types of tracheoesophageal fistula. The first type, if you see, This is type A, where you see esophageal atresia but without tracheoesophageal fistula. There is esophageal atresia but there is no tracheoesophageal fistula. This is type A. Then in type B, if you see, we have proximal fistula is present with atresia. There is proximal fistula is present. So this is 1 minute. There is esophageal atresia with proximal tracheoesophageal fistula. There is esophageal atresia with proximal tracheoesophageal fistula. This is type B. Then we have type C. In this type C, we have esophageal atresia again, and now the fistula is present distally. So this is esophageal atresia with distal tracheoesophageal fistula, right? This is type C and this is the most common type, right? Then we have type D, which is there is tracheoesophageal fistula is present, and we also have both proximal and distal fistulas are seen here. This is both type. This is both. See, this is esophageal atresia with proximal and distal tracheoesophageal fistula. Then this is type D. Then we have type E. In type E, we have tracheoesophageal fistula is only present, right? There is no atresia. This is tracheoesophageal fistula without atresia. Okay, so these are the 5 types of tracheoesophageal fistula. In always see, if you see the clinical features of tracheoesophageal fistula, one most important thing is there is always association of maternal history of polyhydramnios is very important. Then if you see the clinical features, in the clinical features, first, if there is isolated esophageal atresia, because there is isolated esophageal atresia, when the child tries to drink milk, then, or even if she tries to swallow the saliva, then there might be drooling out of the saliva from the mouth, and there will be regurgitation of the feeds. Here you will see regurgitation of the feeds, and also drooling of saliva is seen in isolated esophageal fistula. Then if you see second type, which is, if you see in the tracheoesophageal fistula, if there is tracheoesophageal fistula, that means if there is any type of communication, either proximal or distal, anything with the trachea, then the fluids which we drink might go into the lungs, causing choking, and there can be coughing, and this can cause dyspnea and also cyanosis. So these are main important things which you have to see. Then if you see the diagnosis, in the diagnosis, inability to pass nasogastric tube into the stomach. If we are not able to pass a nasogastric tube into the stomach, then it is definitely tracheoesophageal fistula. Then if on X-ray, if there is presence of gas bubble below the diaphragm, if there is gas bubble below the diaphragm, then it is definitely tracheoesophageal fistula. Okay. Then if there is then we can also diagnose this fistula by using isotonic contrast, but nowadays this has been discouraged for diagnosis of tracheoesophageal fistula, because if this contrast enters the trachea, it can result in aspiration. So we are not using this approach. For type E or H type of fistulas, we will diagnose by either tracheobronchoscopy, with the help of tracheobronchoscopy, with endoscopy we can diagnose this condition. Then if you see the abnormalities which are associated with tracheoesophageal fistula, first type of abnormalities are called as Vacteral abnormalities. That is V for vertebral body segmentation defects and A for anal atresia. Then C, CVS abnormalities. Most commonly it is associated with CVS abnormalities. Then E for tracheoesophageal fistula. And in the CVS also, most common CVS abnormality is ventricular septal defect. Then R for renal, that is unilateral renal agenesis can be seen. Then we have L for L for limb anomalies. Limb anomalies like radial hypoplasia can be seen. Okay, so these are the Vacteral group of anomalies associated with tracheoesophageal fistula. Then if you see the treatment of this is, in the previously we used to use Watterson criteria was used previously, but now this is not used. And here now the treatment mainly depends upon the type of fistula. If it is type A fistula, then it depends upon the gap. If there is small gap between the esophagus, between proximal esophagus and distal esophagus, if this gap is small, then we can put tension free esophagostomy is done. Tension free esophagostomy is done. Okay, then if this gap is larger, then we can do feeding gastrostomy is done in the beginning, and later we will do delayed esophagostomy. This EE is esophagostomy. And then we have type B. For type B, C, D, all these involves both esophageal atresia with fistula. So first you will have to excise the fistula tract, and after excision of the fistula tract you will have to do esophagostomy is done for this type B, C and D. And then we have type E. If you see in type E, in this you will have to excise the fistula tract. First we will excise the fistula tract, and then we have to repair the defect. This is type E, where you excise the fistula tract and then repair the defect. Okay, then if you see the prognosis, the main prognosis of tracheoesophageal fistula, then in the prognosis, the mortality of tracheoesophageal fistula mainly depends upon the cardiac defects and also chromosomal abnormalities. So these are the important pediatric complications in pediatric respiratory disorders. Thank you for watching.